Resident Evil is one of the most beloved horror franchises in gaming, so I decided to compile 2 hours worth of Resident Evil lore for you to fall asleep or just relax to. So let's just dive right in. The Resident Evil saga begins in the fictional Arklay Mountains of the American Midwest, where a series of bizarre murders would set in motion, events that would span decades and continents. The story's roots, however, reach back much further, to the early 20th century and the ambitions of a young aristocrat named Oswell E. Spencer. Born into British nobility, Spencer was a man consumed by visions of human evolution and the creation of a master race. His dreams would eventually birth one of the most notorious pharmaceutical corporations in history and unleash biological horrors upon the world. Spencer's journey toward infamy began when he attended university, where he studied under Dr. James Marcus alongside fellow students Edward Ashford and Brandon Bailey. The three men shared a fascination with a mysterious flower discovered in West Africa, later dubbed the Stairway of the Sun. This rare plant possessed unique properties that would form the foundation of their future research. Indigenous peoples had long known of the flower's dangerous nature, as it gave birth to parasitic organisms that could infect hosts and dramatically alter their behavior and physical capabilities. The Ndapaya tribe of West Africa had encountered these parasites, which they called progenitor, and witnessed firsthand the horrific transformations they could cause. The parasite had the ability to rewrite genetic code, but in most cases, it simply killed the host or transformed them into mindless, violent creatures. However, in rare individuals with specific genetic markers, the progenitor virus could grant enhanced physical abilities without complete loss of cognitive function. This potential for human enhancement captivated Spencer, Marcus, and Ashford. In the late 1960s, the three researchers formally established the Umbrella Corporation, ostensibly a pharmaceutical company dedicated to advancing human health. The company's public face promoted benevolent medical research and drug development, but its true purpose was far more sinister. Spencer had convinced his partners to join him in researching the progenitor virus with the goal of creating biological weapons and achieving his vision of forced human evolution. Edward Ashford's motivations were more scientific in nature, driven by genuine curiosity about the virus's properties, while James Marcus sought recognition and validation for his genius. Umbrella quickly grew into a massive conglomerate with facilities around the world. Spencer's wealth and connections allowed the company to operate with minimal oversight, establishing research facilities in remote locations where unethical experiments could be conducted away from prying eyes. One of the first major facilities was the Arklay Laboratory, building disk nodes in the Spencer Mansion estate in the Arklay Mountains near Raccoon City. Another crucial facility was the executive training school that James Marcus was appointed to manage, where he could continue his viral research under the guise of training future Umbrella executives. Marcus proved to be a brilliant but unstable researcher. His work with the progenitor virus led to the creation of new viral strains, including early versions of what would become the tyrant virus, or T-virus. Marcus conducted countless experiments on various creatures, including leeches, which became a particular obsession. He discovered that the leeches could act as vectors for viral transmission, and even demonstrated a form of collective intelligence when infected. His research notes detailed experiments on hundreds of test subjects, both animal and human, most of whom died in agony or were transformed into grotesque creatures. Edward Ashford, meanwhile, took a different approach to the research. He was more cautious and ethical in his methodology, though still willing to cross moral boundaries in pursuit of knowledge. Ashford's experiments focused on understanding the genetic compatibility factors that allowed some individuals to bond with the virus successfully. He theorized that only those with specific genetic markers, which he termed compatible candidates, could potentially benefit from viral enhancement without complete mental degradation. Unfortunately, Ashford's research was cut short when he accidentally infected himself during an experiment in 1968. He died within days, leaving behind his young daughter, Alexia, and his research partner, Veronica Ashford. Spencer used Ashford's death to consolidate power within Umbrella, gradually pushing out other potential rivals. He became increasingly paranoid and megalomaniacal, seeing himself as the architect of humanity's next evolutionary stage. Spencer's ultimate goal was to create a virus that would allow him to control human evolution itself, positioning himself as a godlike figure ruling over a new world order. To this end, he diverted enormous resources into viral research and the development of biological weapons, or bioorganic weapons, as they were officially termed. James Marcus continued his work at the training facility, growing more isolated and eccentric. His successes with leech-based viral vectors led to breakthrough developments in the T-virus, but his increasingly erratic behavior and tendency to view his creations as his children concerned Spencer. In 1988, Spencer ordered Marcus assassinated, sending his executives Albert Wesker and William Birkin to carry out the execution. The two young researchers ambushed Marcus in his laboratory and left him for dead, then took credit for his research breakthroughs. However, Marcus did not truly die. The leeches he had been experimenting on had bonded with him over years of research, and when his body was left in the laboratory, they consumed his corpse and somehow absorbed his genetic material and memories. Over the following decade, the leech colony achieved a form of collective consciousness that believed itself to be James Marcus. This leech-Marcus hybrid hibernated and grew stronger, eventually manifesting as a seemingly resurrected Marcus with the ability to control vast swarms of leeches and other infected creatures. William Birkin proved to be an even more brilliant researcher than Marcus, though equally unstable. After taking over Marcus's research, Birkin made rapid advances in viral weaponization. He developed the Hunter series of bioorganic weapons, creatures created by injecting fertilized reptile eggs with the T-virus and human genetic material. The resulting monsters possessed superhuman strength, razor-sharp claws, and enough intelligence to follow basic commands. Hunters became one of Umbrella's most successful BOW products, with several variants developed for different combat situations. Birkin's crowning achievement, however, was the development of the Golgotha virus, or G-virus. Unlike the T-virus, which caused rapid mutation and mental degradation, the G-virus was designed to create a more stable and controllable transformation. The virus incorporated the host's DNA into a new organism that could continue evolving, passing its mutations onto offspring through a parasitic reproductive cycle. Birkin became obsessed with the G-virus, seeing it as superior to all previous viral weapons, and viewing himself as its perfect host. Albert Wesker, Birkin's partner in the assassination of Marcus, took a different path. He was assigned to lead Umbrella's intelligence division and served as a captain in the company's private military force, the Umbrella Security Service. Wesker was placed in command of the Special Tactics and Rescue Service unit known as STAORS, which operated out of the Raccoon City Police Department. This position was a cover that allowed Wesker to monitor Raccoon City and the nearby Umbrella facilities, while maintaining the appearance of being a law enforcement officer. Wesker was secretly a test subject in one of Spencer's most ambitious projects, the Wesker Project. Spencer had been attempting to identify and cultivate individuals who possessed genetic traits that would make them compatible with advanced viral enhancement. Children with promising genetic markers were placed in controlled environments under the Wesker name and monitored throughout their development. Albert Wesker was one of 13 subjects, and he proved to be the most promising candidate. Spencer groomed him to become a loyal servant who would eventually undergo viral enhancement to become superhuman. However, Wesker harbored his own ambitions. He chafed under Spencer's control and began making plans to betray Umbrella and seize viral research for himself. He secretly made contact with a rival organization and arranged to provide them with Umbrella's research, in exchange for support in his bid for independence. Wesker knew that he would need combat data on Umbrella's BOWs to make his stolen research valuable, and he devised a plan to obtain it using the STA Evange S unit under his command. The stage was set for the disaster in Raccoon City, a medium-sized American city that had become economically dependent on Umbrella Corporation. The company was the city's largest employer, operating the massive pharmaceutical manufacturing plant on the outskirts of town. Few citizens knew that beneath the city lay a vast underground research complex known as NEST, where Umbrella conducted its most sensitive viral research. The city's government and police force were heavily influenced by Umbrella's money, creating an environment where the company could operate with impunity. In May of 1998, a series of bizarre murders began occurring in the Arklay Mountains. Victims are found partially cannibalized, and witnesses reported being attacked by groups of people who seemed to be in a deranged state. The incidents were initially dismissed as attacks by wild animals or perhaps a serial killer, but as the body count grew, the Raccoon City Police Department was forced to investigate. The department's elite STRS unit was assigned to the case, with Bravo team dispatched on May 23rd to search the mountains. Bravo team's helicopter experienced mechanical difficulties and crashed in the forest, forcing the team to continue on foot. They discovered a derelict facility that appeared to be an Umbrella training school, though it had been abandoned for years. The team encountered strange creatures and evidence of recent activity, including what appeared to be humanoid figures moving in the shadows. Communication with Bravo team was lost, prompting the deployment of Alpha team to search for their missing comrades. Alpha team's helicopter was piloted by Brad Vickers, with Captain Albert Wesker leading Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Joseph Frost into the field. Upon reaching the last known position of Bravo team, they discovered the wreckage of the helicopter and evidence of a struggle. Joseph Frost was suddenly attacked and killed by a pack of what appeared to be monstrous dogs, forcing the team to flee into the forest. They found themselves at the gates of a massive mansion, the Spencer Estate, and took shelter inside. The Spencer Mansion was a testament to Oswell Spencer's wealth and ego, a sprawling complex filled with elaborate puzzles, hidden passages, and ornate decorations. However, the team quickly discovered that the mansion was infested with zombies, reanimated corpses of Umbrella researchers and personnel who had been infected with the T-virus. An outbreak had occurred in the facility several weeks earlier, triggered by the awakening of the Marcus Leach colony. The leeches had infiltrated the water supply and begun infecting the staff, and the resulting chaos had allowed other experimental creatures to escape containment. The STARS members found themselves fighting for survival against impossible odds. Zombies shambled through the corridors while Cerberus zombie dogs prowled the grounds. Hunters stalked the laboratories, and more exotic creatures lurked in hidden chambers. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine led separate investigations through the mansion, uncovering evidence of Umbrella's illegal research and the true nature of the outbreak. They discovered survivors from Bravo team, including Rebecca Chambers, a young medic, and Enrico Marini, though many of their colleagues had already fallen to the creatures. Barry Burton was being blackmailed by Wesker, who had threatened Barry's family to ensure his cooperation in a plan to gather combat data on the BOWs. Wesker had deliberately led STRs into the mansion to observe how trained soldiers would perform against Umbrella's creatures, intending to use the data to increase the value of the information he would sell to his new employers. However, Barry's conscience would not allow him to sacrifice his friends, and he eventually confessed to Jill Valentine and worked to undermine Wesker's plans. As the survivors delved deeper into the mansion complex, they discovered underground laboratories where the most horrific experiments had been conducted. They found evidence of human test subjects who had been deliberately infected and monitored as they transformed. Research notes detailed the development process of various BOWs and revealed the existence of the Tyrant Project, an attempt to create the ultimate biological weapon by infecting specially selected hosts with a refined version of the T-virus. The Tyrant was Umbrella's answer to the limitations of standard bows, and while zombies were easy to create and hunters were effective combat units, neither possessed the intelligence or stability to function as true weapons. The Tyrant was designed to be different, a creature that retained enough cognitive function to follow complex orders, while possessing superhuman strength, speed, and durability. The key was finding a host with perfect genetic compatibility, someone whose body could withstand the virus's effects without complete cellular breakdown. The STA Ozureo-RS members discovered that Wesker himself was planning to unleash a Tyrant, hoping to gather the ultimate combat data by pitting the creature against trained soldiers. In the depths of the laboratory, they confronted Wesker, who revealed his betrayal and his intention to leave them all to die in the mansion. He activated the Tyrant, a towering humanoid creature with an exposed heart and massive clawed hands. Wesker had injected himself with a special virus provided by his new employers, a prototype that would grant him superhuman abilities if he could survive the initial death-like state it induced. The Tyrant, however, was not fully under control. It immediately attacked Wesker, running him through with its claws and apparently killing him. The creature then turned on the STA Borgia-Barrett's members, who were forced to fight the monster in a desperate battle for survival. The Tyrant proved nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons, shrugging off bullets and continuing its relentless assault. The survivors managed to activate the laboratory's self-destruct system, hoping to destroy the facility and all evidence of Umbrella's crimes. In the final moments before the mansion's destruction, the survivors faced the Tyrant one last time on the mansion's helipad. Brad Vickers, who had fled in the helicopter when Alpha Team first arrived, returned to rescue his teammates. He dropped a rocket launcher to the survivors, who used it to finally destroy the Tyrant in a massive explosion. The helicopter escaped just as the entire mansion complex was consumed in a series of devastating explosions, apparently erasing all evidence of Umbrella's presence in the Arklay Mountains. However, Wesker had not died in his confrontation with the Tyrant. The experimental virus he had injected himself with, later known as the prototype virus, had put him into a death-like state that allowed his body to undergo transformation. He revived hours later with superhuman strength, speed, and regenerative abilities, along with enhanced senses and reflexes. Wesker escaped the ruins of the mansion and made contact with his new employers, a mysterious organization that would provide him with resources to continue his research and pursue his own agenda. The surviving STRS members returned to Raccoon City and attempted to expose Umbrella's crimes. They prepared a detailed report documenting the events in the mansion and the evidence they had uncovered, but their efforts were stonewalled at every turn. Umbrella's influence in Raccoon City was too strong, and the company had already prepared a cover story dismissing the incident as a gas leak at an abandoned facility. The Raccoon City Police Department's chief, Brian Irons, was secretly on Umbrella's payroll and ensured that the East TAARS report was buried. Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine refused to let the matter rest. They began conducting their own investigation into Umbrella, gathering evidence and attempting to build a case that could not be ignored. Barry Burton and Rebecca Chambers assisted in the investigation while trying to maintain their positions within the police department. However, their efforts caught Umbrella's attention, and the company began taking steps to silence them. Several STR's members were targeted by assassins, forcing Chris to flee the country and continue his investigation from abroad. Meanwhile, tensions within Umbrella were reaching a breaking point. William Birkin had completed his work on the G-Virus and was preparing to finalize the project when he learned that the United States military had become interested in his research. The government, having received intelligence about Umbrella's illegal bioweapons development, wanted to seize Birkin's research before it could be weaponized or sold to foreign powers. Birkin, paranoid and possessive of his creation, refused to hand over his life's work. Umbrella's leadership, fearing that Birkin would defect to the government with the G-Virus, made a fateful decision. They dispatched the Umbrella Security Service to raid Birkin's laboratory beneath Raccoon City and seize the G-Virus samples by force. The USS team, led by the notorious operative known as Hunk, infiltrated the Nest facility on September 22, 1998. The operation was intended to be a quick extraction, but it went catastrophically wrong. Birkin, confronted by the USS team in his laboratory, refused to surrender his research. The soldiers opened fire, mortally wounding the scientist. As Birkin lay dying on the laboratory floor, he managed to inject himself with the sample of the G-Virus, hoping to save his life through the virus's transformative properties. The virus worked rapidly, healing Birkin's wounds and beginning his mutation into something no longer human. The transformed Birkin, operating on instinct and rage, attacked the USS team with superhuman fury. The G. Birkin creators slaughtered most of the USS team, including those carrying the collected G-Virus samples. In the chaos, vials of the T-Virus were shattered, releasing the pathogen into the facility's systems. The virus spread through the sewers beneath Raccoon City, carried by rats and other vermin into the water supply. Within days, the infection had spread throughout the city's population, though the incubation period meant that most citizens were unaware they had been exposed. By late September, Raccoon City was on the verge of collapse. Reports of violent attacks were increasing exponentially, and the police were overwhelmed trying to respond to thousands of emergency calls. The infection was spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated, with the T-Virus passing from person to person through bites and bodily fluids. The city's infrastructure began to break down as more and more workers failed to show up for their shifts, either dead, infected, or fleeing the chaos. The Raccoon City Police Department found itself at the center of the nightmare. Officers were dispatched to scenes of carnage, only to be attacked by the infected citizens they were trying to help. The police station, a converted art museum with maze-like architecture, became a fortress where survivors gathered in hope of rescue. Officer Leon S. Kennedy arrived for his first day of work on September 29th, driving into the city despite radio warnings to stay away. He had no idea that his first day would thrust him into the heart of a biological catastrophe. Claire Redfield, younger sister of Chris, also arrived in Raccoon City that day, searching for her brother who had gone silent during his investigations of Umbrella. She rode her motorcycle into the city from the opposite direction as Leon, and both found themselves in a nightmare beyond comprehension. The streets were filled with zombies, the walking corpses of Raccoon City's citizens shambling through the ruins of their former lives. Cars were abandoned or crashed, fires burned unchecked, and the sounds of screams and groans echoed through the darkness. Leon and Claire met by chance during the initial chaos, their vehicles crashing as they tried to escape a horde of zombies. They fled together on foot, fighting through crowds of infected, until they were separated by an explosion. The two agreed to meet at the Raccoon Police Department, hoping to find safety and answers there. They arrived separately to discover that the station was under siege, with only a handful of officers still alive and fighting to hold back the undead. Inside the police station, Leon and Claire encountered other survivors struggling to stay alive. They met Lieutenant Marvin Branna, who had been bitten but was fighting off the infection through sheer willpower. Marvin provided them with weapons and information about safe routes through the building before finally succumbing to his infection. They also discovered that Chief Brian Irons had gone insane, murdering his own staff and taking a civilian hostage. The chief's office contained evidence of his corruption and his secret dealings with Umbrella. Claire's search for her brother led her into the depths of the police station, where she discovered a secret passage to the sewers. There she encountered Sherry Birkin, the 12-year-old daughter of William and Annette Birkin. Sherry had been wandering the city alone after fleeing the chaos, clutching a pendant her mother had given her. Claire took responsibility for protecting the girl, not knowing that Sherry was being hunted by her own mutated father, who was driven by a biological imperative to implant her with a G-virus embryo. Leon's path took him deeper into the station's mysteries, where he encountered Ada Wong, a woman claiming to be an FBI agent searching for her boyfriend, a researcher named John. Ada was actually a spy sent by Albert Wesker's new employers to retrieve a G-virus sample from the ruins of Raccoon City. She maintained her cover while working alongside Leon, and despite her deceptive mission, she found herself developing genuine feelings for the young police officer. The survivors' paths converged in the sewers beneath the city, where they discovered that the entire underground infrastructure had become a breeding ground for infected creatures. Giant alligators mutated by the T-virus lurked in the waterways, while swarms of infected rats and other vermin spread the contagion further. The sewers connected to an Umbrella waste treatment facility, which in turn led to the NAS laboratory where the disaster had originated. Annette Birkin, William's wife and research partner, was still alive in the facility, desperately trying to prevent the William G-virus from leaving Raccoon City. She had activated the facility's self-destruct system, and was willing to die to ensure that her husband's monstrous creation didn't escape into the wider world. She revealed to Claire that her husband had become the creature hunting them, and that Sherry was in danger of being implanted with a G-virus embryo that would eventually kill her. The revelation proved accurate when the mutated William Birkin caught up with Sherry and implanted her with an embryo. The parasite began growing rapidly inside her body, and Claire was forced to find a cure before it could mature and kill the girl. Annette, in a moment of maternal love breaking through her scientific detachment, provided Claire with information on creating a vaccine using a specialized sample of the G-virus. Claire fought her way through the laboratory to synthesize the cure, racing against time as Sherry's condition deteriorated. Leon and Ada's investigation led them into conflict with the Tyrant-class BOW that Umbrella had deployed to the city. The T-00 model, later nicknamed Mr. X by survivors, was an advanced Tyrant designed to eliminate witnesses and recover samples of the G-virus. Unlike the prototype Tyrant encountered in the mansion, the T-00 was more stable and intelligent, able to pursue targets relentlessly while maintaining enough control to open doors, climb ladders, and use basic tactics. The creature stalked Leon and Ada through the laboratory complex, its heavy footsteps announcing its approach. Ada's mission to retrieve the G-virus brought her into direct conflict with Annette Birkin, who shot the spy after discovering her true allegiance. Ada fell from a catwalk, apparently dying from her injuries. Leon, devastated by her apparent death, continued alone into the depths of the facility. However, Ada had survived, protected by a bulletproof vest, and she activated a system that would aid Leon in his final confrontation with the mutated William Birkin. The survivors met for a final showdown in the facility's underground train system, the only remaining escape route before the self-destruct sequence completed. The G. Birkin creature had continued mutating throughout the night, becoming increasingly monstrous with each transformation. Its body was covered with eyes and tentacles, its original human form barely recognizable within the mass of mutated tissue. The creature boarded the train as the survivors attempted to escape, forcing them into a desperate final battle. Using weapons stockpiled on the train and Ada's remote assistance, Leon and Claire managed to destroy the G. Birkin creature once and for all. The train accelerated away from the facility as the self-destruct sequence reached its conclusion, and the survivors emerged from underground just as the Nest laboratory was consumed in a massive explosion. They escaped into the city streets with Sherry, who had been successfully cured of her G virus infection, though the virus remained dormant in her system. However, their ordeal was not yet over. The United States government had made the decision to contain the Raccoon City outbreak through the most extreme means possible. Unable to control the infection's spread and fearing that the T-virus would reach other cities, the government authorized a missile strike to sterilize the entire area. Leon, Claire, and Sherry watched from the outskirts as a missile descended on Raccoon City, detonating in a thermobaric explosion that incinerated everything within the city limits. The city of over 100,000 people was effectively erased from existence in a single moment. The destruction of Raccoon City sent shockwaves through the world. Umbrella Corporation attempted to deny responsibility and blame the outbreak on terrorists or natural disasters, but evidence of their involvement was too overwhelming to suppress completely. However, the company's wealth and political connections meant that consequences were limited. Umbrella's stock price plummeted, and several executives were arrested, but Oswald Spencer himself remained hidden, protected by layers of shell companies and loyal subordinates. The survivors of Raccoon City went their separate ways, each dealing with the trauma in their own manner. Leon Kennedy was recruited by the United States government, specifically a division dedicated to combating bioterrorism. His first-hand experience with biological weapons made him invaluable, and despite his reluctance to work for the same government that had destroyed an entire city, he recognized the need to prevent similar disasters. He underwent intensive training and became a special agent with clearance to investigate biological threats worldwide. Claire Redfield joined an NGO called TerraSave, dedicated to helping victims of bioterrorism and raising awareness about the dangers of biological weapons. She used her experience in Raccoon City to advocate for stricter controls on viral research and work to expose companies and organizations that continued Umbrella's legacy. Her work took her around the world, often putting her in danger as she investigated outbreaks and rescued survivors. Sherry Birkin became a ward of the government, her unique status as a G-virus host making her valuable for research purposes. Scientists studied her condition, noting that while she had been cured of the active infection, traces of the virus remained in her system, granting her enhanced healing abilities. She spent years in government facilities, part test subject and part protected asset, waiting for the day she could escape and live a normal life. Ada Wong vanished after the Raccoon City incident, continuing her work as a spy and mercenary for the mysterious organization known only as the Organization. She maintained contact with Wesker, providing him with samples and intelligence while pursuing her own agenda. Her true loyalties remained unclear, as she seemed willing to betray any employer if it suited her purposes, yet she repeatedly helped those she had formed attachments to, particularly Leon. Jill Valentine continued working to expose Umbrella's crimes, partnering with Chris Redfield in an unofficial investigation that took them across multiple continents. They made contact with other anti-Umbrella activists and survivors, forming a loose network dedicated to bringing the company down. Their investigation led them to Europe, where Umbrella maintained several major facilities, including the main headquarters in Paris. Chris and Jill's investigation brought them to the attention of various interested parties, both those who wanted Umbrella destroyed and those who wanted to protect the company's secrets. They survived several assassination attempts and raids on safe houses, but they continued gathering evidence. Their break came when they learned about a secret Umbrella facility in Antarctica, a remote research station where the company conducted its most classified experiments far from any potential oversight. The Antarctic facility was the domain of Alexia Ashford, the daughter of Edward Ashford, and a prodigy who had earned her doctorate at the age of 10. Alexia had been conducting viral research with her twin brother Alfred, and together they had recreated the T. Veronica virus, named after their ancestor Veronica Ashford. The T. Veronica virus was different from the standard T virus, incorporating DNA from plants and allowing for greater preservation of intelligence in infected hosts. However, it required a long incubation period in cryogenic suspension to bond properly with a host. Alexia had tested the virus on her own father, Alexander Ashford, transforming him into a grotesque monster that she kept imprisoned beneath the Antarctic facility. Believing she had perfected the virus, Alexia then injected herself and entered cryogenic sleep in December of 1983, planning to awaken 15 years later when the virus had fully bonded with her system. Her brother Alfred was left to maintain the facility and watch over her sleeping form, a responsibility that drove him deeper into madness as the years passed in isolation. Alfred Ashford's mental state deteriorated dramatically during his sister's long sleep. He developed a split personality, sometimes believing himself to be Alexia and dressing in her clothes while speaking in her voice. He maintained the Antarctic facility and a secondary Umbrella facility on Rockford Island in the Southern Ocean, where he served as commander. Alfred's instability made him cruel and unpredictable, and he used the island facility's prisoners as test subjects for various biological experiments. Claire Redfield's investigation into her brother's whereabouts led her to infiltrate the Rockford Island facility in December of 1998. She was captured by Umbrella security forces and imprisoned in the facility's detention center. However, before she could be interrogated or executed, the island came under attack by a rival organization led by Albert Wesker's former colleague. The attack was intended to destabilize Umbrella's operations and steal research data, but it resulted in a massive outbreak when the facility's BOW's containment systems were damaged. Claire escaped from her cell during the chaos and found herself fighting through hordes of zombies and other creatures that had been released from containment. She encountered Steve Burnside, a 17-year-old prisoner whose father had attempted to sell the Umbrella secrets to a rival organization. Steve's entire family had been captured and experimented on, with his father being transformed into a zombie that Steve was forced to kill. The traumatized young man joined Claire in her escape attempt, and the two fought their way through the island facility. Alfred Ashford, alerted to the intrusion and outbreak, hunted Claire and Steve through the facility while suffering episodes of his alternate personality. He deployed various BOWs against them, including the Bandersnatch creatures, experimental BOWs with extending elastic arms that could grab prey from a distance. Alfred also activated the facility's self-destruct system, intending to destroy all evidence of Umbrella's presence on the island and eliminate the intruders. Claire and Steve managed to escape the island by plane just as it exploded, but they unknowingly flew to the Antarctic facility using coordinates programmed to the plane by Alfred. Upon arriving at the frozen research station, they discovered that it was another Umbrella facility, this one even more isolated and secretive than Rockford Island. The facility was partially abandoned but still operational, with automated systems maintaining the complex and its frozen specimens. Alfred Ashford followed them to Antarctica, having survived the island's destruction. He confronted the pair in the Antarctic facility, but his injuries from the previous battles proved too severe, and he died while trying to reach his sister's cryogenic chamber. His death triggered a system that began the process of awakening Alexia from her 15-year sleep. The T. Veronica virus had successfully bonded with her during the long incubation period, granting her incredible powers without destroying her intelligence. Chris Redfield received a message from Claire indicating her location and arrived at the Antarctic facility to rescue his sister. He brought with him intelligence about the facility and knowledge of the T. Veronica virus, having learned about Alexia Ashford's research during his investigation of Umbrella. Chris fought his way through the facility, encountering Albert Wesker, who had also come to Antarctica seeking a sample of the T. Veronica virus for his own purposes. The confrontation between Chris and Wesker revealed the extent of Wesker's transformation. The former STR's captain now possessed superhuman abilities that made him nearly invincible. He could move faster than the eye could follow, punch through steel, and regenerate from injuries that would kill a normal human. Wesker toyed with Chris, demonstrating his superiority before moving deeper into the facility to complete his mission. Their encounter made it clear that Wesker had become something far more dangerous than any BOW Umbrella had created. Alexia Ashford emerged from her cryogenic sleep fully transformed by the T. Veronica virus. Her body had taken on plant-like characteristics, with her blood becoming flammable and her cells capable of controlling fire at a molecular level. She retained her genius intellect and her memories, but her personality had become even more cruel and sadistic. She saw herself as a superior being, the next stage in human evolution, and viewed all others as inferior organisms to be studied or destroyed. Steve Burnside became one of Alexia's victims when she captured him and infected him with the T. Veronica virus. Unlike Alexia, Steve did not have the benefit of a long incubation period, and the virus transformed him rapidly into a monstrous creature. He attacked Claire while under the virus's control, but a fragment of his human consciousness remained. In his final moments, Steve regained control long enough to save Claire from Alexia's attack, sacrificing himself in the process. His death devastated Claire, who had formed a close bond with the young man during their ordeal. Chris and Claire joined forces to confront Alexia in the depths of the Antarctic facility. The battle against her was unlike anything they had faced before. Alexia could control fire, create toxic gases, and command various mutated creatures with her mind. As she took damage, she underwent further transformations, her body becoming increasingly monstrous while somehow retaining her human face and intelligence. She eventually transformed into a massive insectoid queen form, intended to reproduce and create an army of T. Veronica infected creatures. The Redfield siblings managed to defeat Alexia using experimental weapons found in the facility, including a linear launcher that could fire concentrated energy beams. As Alexia died, her body dissolved into a pool of viral material, and the facility's self-destruct system activated. Chris and Claire barely escaped the exploding complex, evacuating as the entire Antarctic base was consumed in fire and ice. They had dealt a significant blow to Umbrella's research capabilities, destroying one of the company's most advanced facilities and eliminating one of its most dangerous researchers. However, Albert Wesker had successfully obtained a sample of the T. Veronica virus from Steve Burnside's corpse before the facility's destruction. He delivered the sample to his employers, further advancing his own agenda. Wesker's goals extended beyond simply stealing and selling viral research. He had developed a philosophy that humanity needed to be culled and evolved through viral selection, with only the strong and adaptable surviving, to create a new world order. He saw himself as the catalyst for this change, and began working toward a future where he would control the direction of human evolution. The turn of the millennium brought increased pressure on Umbrella Corporation. Multiple governments were investigating the company's activities, and survivors of various outbreaks were coming forward with testimony about Umbrella's crimes. The destruction of Raccoon City had been a public relations disaster that no amount of money or influence could completely suppress. Umbrella's stock value had crashed, and the company was hemorrhaging money as facilities were raided and seized by authorities. In 2003, Umbrella Corporation officially declared bankruptcy and dissolved. The announcement was met with celebration by anti-bioterrorism activists and survivors, but those who had fought Umbrella knew that the victory was hollow. The company's collapse did not destroy its research or eliminate the threat of bioterrorism. Umbrella's viral research had been scattered to the winds, with samples and data falling into the hands of various organizations, governments, and independent actors. If anything, the fall of Umbrella made the bioterrorism threat worse by removing the one entity that had controlled most of the world's viral weapons research. Former Umbrella researchers found new employment with pharmaceutical companies, military contractors, and criminal organizations. They brought their knowledge and expertise to these new employers, spreading bioweapons technology around the globe. Some genuinely wanted to use their knowledge for legitimate purposes, developing vaccines and studying viral biology for medical applications. Others simply continued their work creating biological weapons for whoever would pay them. The bioweapons black market exploded, with T-virus samples and related research selling for millions of dollars. Oswell E. Spencer had disappeared long before Umbrella's collapse, having foreseen the company's doom and made preparations to preserve his legacy. He maintained control of certain research facilities and samples through shell companies and loyal subordinates. Spencer retreated to his estate in Europe, protected by private security and continuing to pursue his vision of creating a new breed of superior humans. He believed that Umbrella's failure was merely a setback, and that his ultimate goal of controlling human evolution was still achievable. Albert Wesker's betrayal had not been forgotten by Spencer, who viewed his former protege as both a failure and a threat. Wesker had exceeded expectations in some ways, successfully bonding with the prototype virus and gaining superhuman abilities. However, he had also proven disloyal and ambitious, qualities that made him dangerous to Spencer's plans. The old man knew that eventually he and Wesker would have a reckoning, and he made preparations for that. Confrontation. Leon Kennedy's work as a government agent took him around the world, investigating bioterrorism incidents and responding to outbreaks. His most significant mission came in 2004, when he was assigned to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, who had been kidnapped by an unknown group. Intelligence suggested she had been taken to a remote rural area of Spain, and Leon was deployed alone to infiltrate the region and extract her. Leon arrived in a Spanish village that seemed frozen in time, a community of farmers and peasants living much as their ancestors had centuries before. However, he quickly discovered that something was terribly wrong with the villagers. They were hostile and violent, attacking him with farming implements and inhuman strength. Unlike zombies, these villagers retained their intelligence and ability to coordinate, making them far more dangerous. They could use weapons, set traps, and work together to corner their prey. The villagers were infected with a parasitic organism called Las Plagas, Spanish for the plague. The parasite was ancient, dating back centuries to when the region had been controlled by a religious cult. The cult had worshipped Las Plagas as a divine organism and used it to control their followers. The parasite would grow inside a host's body, eventually attaching to the nervous system and allowing the cult leaders, who carried Queen Plagas, to control infected individuals like puppets. The cult had been suppressed by the Spanish crown, and the Plagas sealed away in a mine that was then flooded. A mysterious figure known as Osmond Sadler had taken control of the region and revived the ancient cult. Sadler had excavated the sealed mine, releasing Las Plagas and infecting the local population. He then used his control over the parasites to transform the villagers into his devoted servants. Sadler's plan was to use Ashley Graham as a carrier, infecting her with the Las Plagas and then sending her back to the United States, where the parasite would grow and allow him to control the president's daughter. Through her, he would gain access to the highest levels of American government. Leon fought his way through the infected village, discovering that the parasite could cause grotesque transformations in its hosts. When threatened or damaged, the plagas would erupt from the host body, often through the head or torso, creating tentacled appendages that could strike at prey. Some hosts underwent even more dramatic transformations, becoming towering creatures with armored skin and massive claws. The infected villagers, called ganados, were relentless in their pursuit of Leon, using their numbers and coordination to try to overwhelm him. The agent eventually located Ashley Graham in a church where she was being held by the cult. He rescued her, but discovered that she had already been injected with a plagas parasite. Leon had also been infected during his battles with the ganados, having a parasite forcibly implanted in his body. Both of them were now on a deadline, racing to find a way to remove the parasites before they matured and took control of their bodies. The symptoms are already manifesting, with both experiencing blackouts and hearing Sadler's voice in their minds. Leon's mission to escape with Ashley led him deeper into the cult's operations. He discovered that Sadler was working with a mysterious organization and had access to significant resources and technology. The cult had established a sophisticated operation in the area, including laboratories where they bred and modified plagas parasites. They had also hired mercenaries and equipped them with military-grade weapons and equipment, making them far more dangerous than simple cultists. The agent encountered Ada Wong, who was once again operating in the shadows with her own agenda. She had been sent by Wesker's organization to obtain a sample of the control plagas, the queen parasite that Sadler used to command his infected servants. Ada provided Leon with assistance at key moments, though he maintained her cover and continued pursuing her mission. Their complicated relationship was tested as Leon struggled with his infection and the need to trust someone who had repeatedly deceived him. Leon also crossed paths with Jack Krauser, his former military instructor, who was presumed dead. Krauser had survived a mission gone wrong in South America and been recruited by Wesker's organization. He had volunteered to be infected with the control plagas and modified into a super soldier, gaining the ability to transform his arm into a massive blade-like appendage. Krauser was the one who had kidnapped Ashley Graham, and he now served Sadler while secretly planning to betray him and deliver the control plagas sample to Wesker. The confrontation between Leon and Krauser was intensely personal, as Leon had looked up to his instructor and been devastated by news of his death. Krauser revealed his contempt for Leon, believing that the younger agent lacked the killer instinct necessary to survive in their world. Their battle took them across ancient ruins and castle battlements, with Krauser using his mutated arm and military training to push Leon to his limits. Leon ultimately defeated his former mentor, who died believing that Leon had finally proven himself worthy. The cult's operations were centered in a massive castle complex and a nearby island facility, where Sadler maintained his most dangerous experiments. Leon and Ashley fought through both locations, encountering increasingly dangerous enemies including the Regenerators, creatures with Las Plagas integrated throughout their entire bodies that allowed them to regenerate damage almost instantly. Only by destroying specific plagas nodes could the creatures be killed permanently, requiring the use of thermal scope weapons to identify the weak points. Ramon Salazar, a Castellan who served Sadler, proved to be one of Leon's most persistent enemies. Despite his small stature and aristocratic demeanor, Salazar commanded powerful BOWs, including the Verdugo, a suit of armor inhabited by a highly evolved plagas that acted as his bodyguard. Salazar eventually transformed himself by merging with a massive plant-based organism infected with Las Plagas, becoming a grotesque fusion of human and vegetative matter. Leon destroyed him in the depths of the castle, eliminating one of Sadler's key lieutenants. Leon and Ashley eventually discovered a machine designed to remove Las Plagas parasites using specialized radiation. The technology had been developed to save important hosts from accidental infection, and it represented their only chance of survival. Both underwent the painful procedure, having the parasites killed and expelled from their bodies. The treatment left them weakened but free from Sadler's control and the threat of transformation. The final confrontation with Osmond Sadler revealed the cult leader's true form. The control plagas he carried had transformed him into a massive creature with multiple limbs, eyes across his body, and the ability to mutate further as he took damage. Sadler could transform parts of his body into weapons, creating blade-like appendages and tentacles that could impale or grab his prey. The battle seemed hopeless until Ada Wong intervened, tossing Leon a special rocket launcher designed specifically to destroy powerful bows. Leon used the weapon to obliterate Sadler in a massive explosion. With Sadler dead, his control over the Ganados was broken. The infected villagers and cultists lost their coordination and began wandering aimlessly or fighting among themselves. Leon and Ashley escaped the island facility by jet ski as the entire complex exploded, destroyed by self-destruct systems activated during the chaos. Ada escaped separately with her sample of the control plagas, completing her mission for Wesker's organization. The Spanish incident demonstrated that the bioterrorism threat had evolved beyond Umbrella's legacy. Las Plagas represented a different approach to biological weapons, using parasitism rather than viral infection. The parasites offered more control over infected hosts while preserving their intelligence and physical capabilities. Various organizations and governments took note of this development, and soon Las Plagas samples were circulating on the black market, alongside T-virus and other biological agents. The United States government established the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, known as the BSA, in response to the growing bioterrorism threat. The organization was initially founded by the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium and endorsed by multiple nations, though it operated with relative independence. The BSAA's mission was to investigate bioterrorism incidents worldwide and respond with military force when necessary. It recruited the experienced operatives who had encountered biological weapons, including Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. Chris and Jill became founding members of the BSAA and were assigned to investigate a bioterrorism incident in a European city. They tracked a black market dealer who was selling biological weapons to terrorist organizations and criminal syndicates. The investigation led them to a pier where a meeting between the dealer and his contacts was scheduled to take place. The operation went wrong when the dealer released BOWs in an attempt to escape, forcing the BSAA agents to fight through infected civilians and combat BOWs in an urban environment. During the chaos, Jill and Chris finally tracked down Oswell E. Spencer to his estate. They had been hunting Umbrella's founder for years, and finally had intelligence on his location. They arrived at the mansion to discover Albert Wesker had beaten them there. Wesker had come to confront his creator and demand answers about the Wesker project and his true purpose. Spencer revealed that Wesker and the other children in the project had been selected and cultivated specifically to become his heirs, with the virus transforming them into superior beings, worthy of inheriting Spencer's vision. However, Spencer's revelation came too late to save him. Wesker, enraged by the manipulation and viewing Spencer as a relic of an outdated vision, murdered the old man. Wesker declared that Spencer's dream of controlling human evolution was too limited, that humanity needed to be tested through viral selection on a global scale. He envisioned a world where only the strong would survive, where human evolution would be forced forward through biological crisis. Spencer died knowing that his creation had surpassed him, and would pursue an even more dangerous vision. Chris and Jill arrived just in time to witness Spencer's death. They confronted Wesker, leading to a battle that demonstrated how outmatched normal humans were against Wesker's enhanced abilities. Wesker effortlessly dodged bullets and counterattacked with superhuman speed. The fight moved through the mansion, with Wesker toying with his former subordinate, demonstrating his superiority at every turn. Jill intervened at a critical moment, tackling Wesker through a window. Both Jill and Wesker plummeted from the mansion window, falling toward the cliff below. Chris rushed to the edge but found no trace of either of them. Jill was presumed dead. Her body never recovered from the rocky shore. Chris was devastated by the loss of his longtime partner and friend. He threw himself into his work with the BSAA, becoming even more dedicated to fighting bioterrorism and hunting Albert Wesker. The loss of Jill drove Chris to push himself harder, taking on increasingly dangerous missions. However, Jill had not died in the fall. Wesker had caught her during their descent, and his regenerative abilities had saved them both from fatal injury. He took Jill captive, seeing an opportunity to use her in his experiments. Wesker subjected Jill to various tests, injecting her with experimental viruses and using her as a test subject for his research. Eventually, he developed a device that would allow him to control her through chemical manipulation, turning Chris's closest friend into his puppet. In 2009, Chris was assigned to investigate a bioterrorism incident in Kijuju, a region in West Africa. The BSAA had received intelligence that a black market dealer named Ricardo Irving was selling biological weapons to terrorist organizations in the area. Chris was partnered with Shiva Alomar, a BSAA agent who had grown up in the region and had personal reasons for fighting bioterrorism. Her parents had been killed during an Umbrella experiment years earlier, driving her to join the fight against biological weapons. Chris and Sheva arrived in Kijuju to find the local population infected with Las Plagas parasites. The plagas had been modified and adapted to African hosts, creating a new variant that was more aggressive and caused different mutations. The infected villagers, called Majini, attacked the BSA agents on site, using weapons and coordination similar to the Ganados in Spain. The situation was worse than intelligence had suggested, with the infection spread throughout the region. The agents discovered that the bioterrorism incident was far more extensive than a simple weapons deal. A pharmaceutical company called Tricell had established operations in the region, ostensibly to provide medical aid and economic development. In reality, Tricell was conducting illegal bioweapons research and testing their products on the local population. The company had connections to former Umbrella researchers and had acquired viral samples from the black market. Ricardo Irving was a Tricell executive who managed the company's black market weapons deals. He led Chris and Sheva on a chase through the region, always staying one step ahead while deploying various BOWs against them. Irving was infected with the control plagas and had access to Tricell's experimental mutations. When finally cornered, he injected himself with experimental viral compounds, transforming into a massive aquatic creature with tentacles and enhanced regenerative abilities. Chris and Sheva destroyed him in a battle on the docks, but not before he revealed that he was just a small part of Tricell's operations. The investigation led Chris and Sheva deeper into Tricell's facilities, where they discovered evidence of Wesker's involvement. Tricell's executive Excella Gione had been working with Wesker, providing him with resources and test subjects for his research. Excella believed she was Wesker's partner and would rule alongside him in his new world order, but in reality, she was just another pawn in his plans. Wesker was using Tricell's resources to develop Ouroboros, a virus that would serve as the ultimate tool of human evolution. Ouroboros was Wesker's attempt to create a virus that would perfectly select for genetic superiority. When introduced to a host, the virus would either bond successfully with compatible individuals, granting them enhanced abilities, or reject incompatible hosts, transforming them into mindless monsters that would quickly die. Wesker's plan was to release Ouroboros globally, creating a crisis that would kill billions, but leave the survivors as the foundation of a new human species. He genuinely believed he was saving humanity by purging it of weakness. Chris discovered that Jill Valentine was alive but under Wesker's control. She appeared as a masked figure who attacked Chris and Sheva with enhanced combat abilities, her body strengthened by the experiments Wesker had performed on her. The confrontation was agonizing for Chris, who found himself fighting his best friend. Shiva's intervention allowed them to remove the control device from Jill's chest, freeing her from Wesker's influence. Jill revealed Wesker's plans and his location, providing crucial intelligence for stopping him. Jill's time as Wesker's test subject had exposed her to massive doses of the T-virus and other compounds, which had bonded with her system and slowed her aging while enhancing her physical capabilities. However, the experience had left her traumatized, and the high doses of virus in her system meant she needed time to recover. She could not accompany Chris and Sheva on their final mission against Wesker, instead providing support and coordination from a safe location. Wesker's base of operations was hidden in an ancient underground facility beneath the African desert. The ruins dated back centuries and had been built by the Ndapaya tribe, the same people who had first discovered the Stairway of the Sunflower. Wesker had excavated the ruins and established a high-tech laboratory within them, using the location's isolation to conduct his final experiments with Ouroboros. He had also prepared missiles loaded with Ouroboros virus, ready to launch and spread the virus globally. Chris and Sheva infiltrated the facility, fighting through security forces and BOWs that Wesker had deployed as guardians. They witnessed the horrific results of Ouroboros testing, with test subjects transformed into masses of writhing black tentacles, their bodies consumed by the virus and reformed into monstrous shapes. The incompatible hosts had become mindless creatures driven only by the need to find new hosts and spread the infection. The facility was filled with these failed experiments, testament to Wesker's willingness to sacrifice thousands in pursuit of his vision. Excella Gianni met her fate when Wesker betrayed her, injecting her with Ouroboros as a final test. She'd believed herself to be special, compatible with the virus, but she was rejected just like the other test subjects. Her body was consumed by the black tentacles, transforming her into a massive Ouroboros monster. Chris and Shiva were forced to destroy her using fire to burn away the viral mass. Excella's death proved that Wesker had never intended to share power with anyone, that his vision of the future had no room for partners or equals. The confrontation with Wesker took place in the depths of the ancient ruins, surrounded by murals depicting the Ndapaya tribe's encounters with the progenitor virus. Wesker revealed the full scope of his plan, explaining that humanity had stagnated and needed a dramatic push to evolve. He saw himself as the agent of that evolution, willing to make the hard decisions that would shape humanity's future. Wesker believed that the weak deserved to die, and that those who survived his viral selection would be grateful for the opportunity to transcend their limitations. Chris and Shiva engaged Wesker in combat, but quickly discovered that he was virtually unstoppable. His superhuman speed allowed him to dodge bullets with ease, and his strength let him punch through concrete and metal. He could regenerate from injuries almost instantly, making conventional weapons useless. The battle seemed hopeless until Jill, coordinating from outside the facility, discovered Wesker's weakness. The prototype virus that gave him his powers required regular doses of a specialized serum to remain stable. Without it, the virus would enhance itself beyond Wesker's ability to control. Chris managed to inject Wesker with the overdose of his stabilizing serum, causing the virus to become hyperactive. Wesker's regeneration accelerated to dangerous levels, with his body beginning to mutate uncontrollably. His superhuman abilities remained, but he lost the perfect control he had maintained over his enhanced form. The agents used this opportunity to damage him severely, forcing him to retreat to his backup escape plan. Wesker attempted to launch the Ouroboros missiles, but Chris and Shiva sabotaged the launch system. Enraged, Wesker pursued them to an aircraft hangar where a massive bomber loaded with Ouroboros was preparing for takeoff. The agents managed to board the plane, but Wesker followed them. A fierce battle ensued in the cargo hold as the plane took off, with Wesker's mutations becoming more pronounced. His body was beginning to reject the virus's enhancements, causing painful transformations that made him increasingly monstrous. The bomber was shot down by BSAA forces, crashing into a volcano. Chris and Sheva survived the crash and found themselves in the caldera, surrounded by molten lava. Wesker had also survived, but his body was failing him. In a desperate attempt to regain control, he injected himself with Ouroboros, believing that his enhanced biology would allow him to bond successfully with the virus. Instead, the combination of the prototype virus and Ouroboros transformed him into a grotesque monster, his body covered in glowing orange pustules and writhing tentacles. The final battle against Wesker's mutated form was brutal. The creature retained fragments of Wesker's intelligence and fighting ability, but he was driven mad by pain and rage. Chris and Sheva targeted the weak points in his mutated flesh, using everything at their disposal to damage him. The creature pursued them across the volcanic landscape, its tentacles destroying everything in reach. Finally, with the help of weapons dropped by the ZIA helicopter, they managed to weaken him enough to push him into the lava. Even immersed in molten rock, Wesker continued fighting, his regeneration and keeping him alive in the extreme heat. Chris and Sheva used rocket launches to deliver the final blow, triggering a massive explosion that finally destroyed Wesker completely. The architect of so much suffering and death was gone, his body consumed by the volcano. His dreams of forced human evolution died with him, though the threat of bioterrorism remained very much alive. The Kajuju incident was officially labeled a success, with Wesker eliminated and the Ouroboros threat neutralized. However, the cost had been tremendous. The entire region had been infected, and thousands had died or been transformed into monsters. Tricell's involvement was exposed, leading to the company's dissolution and the arrest of many executives. However, like with Umbrella's collapse, Tricell's fall simply scattered bioweapons technology further, with researchers and samples disappearing into the black market. The BSA expanded its operations significantly after the African incident, receiving increased funding and authority from multiple governments. The organization established regional branches around the world, recruiting agents with military and scientific backgrounds. Chris Redfield became one of the BSA's most respected operatives, leading high-risk missions against bioterrorism threats. Jill Valentine eventually returned to active duty after recovering from her ordeal, though she struggled with the trauma of having been used as Wesker's puppet. In 2011, a new bioterrorism threat emerged when terrorist organizations began using BOWs in active combat situations. The wars in the Middle East became testing grounds for biological weapons, with various factions deploying infected soldiers and creatures against their enemies. One incident involved the use of Las Plagas, infected combatants in a war zone, leading to the infection spreading among both military and civilian populations. Leon Kennedy was deployed to investigate reports of BOW usage in Eastern Europe, where a civil war had erupted in the fictional nation of the Eastern Slav Republic. The country had fractured along ethnic lines, with multiple factions fighting for control. Leon discovered that one faction was being supplied with Las Plagas parasites, and was using them to create super soldiers. The infected soldiers retained their training and intelligence while gaining enhanced physical abilities, making them devastating on the battlefield. Leon's investigation revealed that the parasites were being provided by a black market dealer who had connections to former Umbrella researchers. The dealer was selling to anyone willing to pay, regardless of the humanitarian consequences. Leon infiltrated the war zone and worked to expose the bioweapons trafficking, but found himself caught between multiple factions, all of whom wanted to either kill him or use him for their own purposes. The situation in Eastern Slav Republic demonstrated how bioweapons had become tools of warfare rather than just terrorist weapons. Military organizations around the world were researching ways to enhance their soldiers using viral modification, seeking to create the perfect warrior who could outperform normal humans. The ethical implications were staggering, but the potential military advantages were too tempting for many nations to ignore. Meanwhile, a new organization called Neo Umbrella emerged, claiming to be the successor to the original Umbrella Corporation. Neo Umbrella was led by a mysterious figure who used the name Carla Radames, though investigation would later reveal a far more complex truth. The organization began conducting bioterrorism attacks around the world, specifically targeting locations associated with the BSAA and anti-bioterrorism efforts. Their attacks were well coordinated and demonstrated access to advanced viral research. In 2012, a major bioterrorism attack struck Tall Oaks, a small American city. The attack occurred during a presidential address where the president planned to reveal the truth about the Raccoon City incident and the government's knowledge of Umbrella's activities. The president, who had been Leon Kennedy's friend, and the reason Leon joined government service, believed that transparency was necessary to prevent future incidents. However, the president had been infected with an enhanced version of the T-virus before his speech. As he addressed the crowd, the virus activated, and he transformed into a zombie in front of the cameras. The incident was broadcast live, causing panic across the nation. Leon Kennedy, who was present as part of the president's security detail, was forced to shoot his friend to prevent him from spreading the infection. The traumatic moment would haunt Leon for years. The attack on Tall Oaks was just the beginning. The enhanced T-virus, called the C-virus, spread rapidly through the city. The C-virus was a hybrid that combined elements of the T-virus and the G-virus, creating infections that were both highly contagious and capable of rapid mutation. Infected victims transformed into zombies within minutes, and some underwent further mutations into more dangerous forms. The city descended into chaos as the infection spread exponentially. Leon escaped Tall Oaks with Helena Harper, a government agent who revealed that she had been blackmailed into helping with the attack. Her sister had been kidnapped by Neo Umbrella and used as leverage to force Helena to cooperate. Together they fought through the infected city, searching for Helena's sister and trying to understand who was behind the attack. They discovered that the conspiracy reached high into the government, with officials who had been compromised or willingly cooperated with Neo Umbrella. The United States government made the decision to sterilize Tall Oaks with a missile strike, just as they had done with Raccoon City. Leon and Helena barely escaped before the city was destroyed, taking with them evidence about the conspiracy. The destruction of a second American city to contain a viral outbreak sparked intense political debate and public outcry. Many questioned how the government could have allowed another Raccoon City to occur, and why bioterrorism preparedness was still so inadequate. At the same time, Chris Redfield and his BSAA unit were deployed to the fictional Eastern European country of Edonia, where civil war had erupted. Neo Umbrella was providing the rebel forces with C-virus injections, transforming volunteers into mutant soldiers called Javo. Unlike zombies or traditional BOWs, Javo retained their intelligence and could use weapons and tactics. When damaged, individual body parts of Java would undergo dramatic mutations, transforming into organic weapons or enhanced limbs. Chris's mission in Adonia went catastrophically wrong when his team was ambushed by a mysterious woman in a blue dress. She deployed a powerful BOW called the Ograman and used gas grenades containing the C virus. Chris's entire team was wiped out, either killed in combat or infected and transformed. Chris himself survived but suffered a mental breakdown from the trauma, developing amnesia about the incident. He went to hiding, abandoning the BSAA and trying to drink away his memories. 6 months later, Chris was discovered by his former partner, Piers Nevens, who had been searching for him. Piers convinced Chris to return to the BSAA, though Chris still had no memory of what had happened in Adonia. He was assigned to investigate a bioterrorism incident in Lanshang, China, where Neo Umbrella had launched a massive C-virus attack. The city was under siege, with zombies and Javos spreading through the streets while the military attempted to contain the outbreak. In Lanshang, Chris encountered Leon Kennedy, leading to a tense confrontation. Chris had learned that Ada Wong was responsible for the death of his team in Adonia, and he was determined to kill her. Leon, who had also encountered Ada during his investigation of the Tall Oaks attack, tried to protect her, believing there was more to the situation than it appeared. The two nearly came to blows before agreeing to pursue their separate investigations and meet later to share information. The truth behind Neo Umbrella and the mysterious Ada Wong was far stranger than anyone suspected. The real Ada Wong was not involved in Neo Umbrella's activities. Instead, a woman named Carla Radames had been transformed into a perfect clone of Ada through an experimental procedure using the C virus. Carla had been a brilliant researcher working for a branch of the organization known as the Family, which had employed the real Ada Wong as a spy. The family's leader, Derek Simmons, had become obsessed with Ada and arranged for Carla to be transformed into her duplicate. The transformation had driven Carla insane, destroying her original identity and leaving her with a burning hatred for Simmons and the real Ada. She created Neo Umbrella and launched the bioterrorism campaign specifically to destroy everything Simmons had built and to make the world suffer as she had suffered. Carla's attacks were acts of revenge, and she cared nothing for the millions who would die as a result of her actions. Her twisted love for Simmons had transformed into an equally twisted desire to see him destroyed. Derek Simmons was a high-ranking official in the United States government and the leader of the Family, a secret organization that had manipulated world events for centuries. The Family had been involved in numerous conspiracies, including the cover-up of the Raccoon City incident. Simmons had orchestrated the attack on Tall Oaks to prevent the president from revealing the truth about government involvement with bioweapons research. He had used Carla's research to create the C virus, and had deployed it against his own nation to protect the family's secrets. Ada Wong, the real one, was conducting her own investigation into Neo Umbrella and the Family. She had learned about Carla's existence and was working to stop both Carla and Simmons. Ada's mission brought her into conflict with both Leon's team and Chris's BSAA unit, as neither group could distinguish between her and Carla. She worked in the shadows, gathering evidence and sabotaging Neo Umbrella's operations, while trying to avoid being killed by those who thought she was the enemy. The situation in Lanshang escalated when Carla deployed a massive organic weapon called the Lopotica, a chrysalis-like creature that was designed to spread C-virus gas across the entire city. Chris and his team infiltrated the creature and destroyed it from within, preventing the catastrophic spread of infection. However, Carla had backup plans, including a contingency that would activate if she was killed. Leon and Helena tracked Derek Simmons through the chaos of Lanshang, gathering evidence of his crimes and his involvement in the Family. Simmons had injected himself with an enhanced version of the C virus, believing he could control it and use it to escape justice. Instead, the virus transformed him into a powerful mutant with regenerative abilities. Leon was forced to fight Simmons repeatedly as the man mutated into increasingly monstrous forms, each more grotesque than the last. The final confrontation with Simmons took place on a military transport train, where he had transformed into a massive dinosaur-like creature. Leon and Helena used experimental weapons to finally kill him, ending his threat permanently. With Simmons dead, the family's power structure collapsed, exposing many of their agents and operations. However, like previous organizations, the family's destruction simply scattered its resources and knowledge, creating new threats. Carla Radames met her end at the hands of her own creation. When she was shot by one of Simmons' agents, her contingency plan activated. She had injected herself with a special version of the C virus that would transform her into a massive blob-like creature upon death, one that would continue growing and spreading infection indefinitely. Ada Wong confronted this final form of Carla, using experimental weapons to destroy the creature before it could engulf the city. Jake Muller, a mercenary fighting in the Adonian Civil War, discovered that he was the son of Albert Wesker. His mother had been one of Wesker's brief relationships, and Jake had inherited his father's genetic compatibility with viruses. When infected with the C virus during the Adonia outbreak, Jake's body successfully bonded with it, granting him enhanced abilities without transforming him into a monster. His blood contained antibodies that could be used to create a vaccine for the C virus. Jake was partnered with Sherry Birkin, who had become a government agent after years in protective custody. Sherry's enhanced healing abilities, a result of her childhood G-virus infection, made her the ideal person to protect Jake. The two were captured by Neo Umbrella and held prisoner for 6 months, while Carla extracted samples of Jake's blood to study his immunity. They eventually escaped and joined the fight against Neo Umbrella, with Jake using his enhanced abilities to combat the organization's BOWs. The revelation of Jake's parentage created complications, as many wanted to kill him simply for being Wesker's son. Chris Redfield, in particular, struggled with his hatred for Wesker and his desire to protect an innocent man. Eventually, Chris recognized that Jake was not his father and that judging him for Wesker's crimes would be unjust. Jake's blood was used to develop a vaccine for the C virus, potentially saving millions of lives. The Lanshang and Tall Oaks incidents marked a turning point in the fight against bioterrorism. The public could no longer deny the threat, and governments were forced to take more aggressive action. The BSAA received expanded authority and funding, becoming essentially a global military force dedicated to combating biological weapons. New international treaties were signed to regulate biological research, though enforcement remained problematic. In 2014, another major incident occurred on a remote island in the Mediterranean. The island of Sam was home to a former Soviet research facility that had been conducting classified bioweapons research during the Cold War. After the Soviet Union's collapse, the facility had been abandoned, but recent activity suggested someone had reactivated it. The BSAA dispatched a team to investigate, including both veteran operatives and newer recruits. The team discovered that the facility had been taken over by a terrorist organization that had discovered the Soviet bioweapons research. The terrorists had found samples of various viruses and BOWs that had been in cryogenic storage for decades. They had awakened these creatures and were planning to auction them off to the highest bidders. The island had become infested with Soviet-era BOWs, including experimental creatures that had never been seen before. Claire Redfield, working with TerraSave, had been conducting humanitarian work on a nearby island when her team was kidnapped by the terrorists. The organization had captured Claire and several other TerraSave members intending to use them as test subjects for their bioweapons demonstrations. Claire found herself imprisoned in the facility, forced to survive alongside other captives, while the terrorists conducted cruel experiments. The BSAA assault on the facility turned into a rescue mission when they learned about the captured TerraSave members. Barry Burton, who had come out of retirement when he learned his daughter Moira was among the captives, joined the operation. The mission involved 2 time periods, with the initial assault in 2011 being followed by a return to the island 6 months later to search for survivors. The island's overseer was a mysterious figure known as Alex Wesker, who claimed to be Albert Wesker's sister from the Wesker Project. Alex had been conducting research into immortality, seeking to transfer her consciousness into a younger, healthier body. She'd been dying from a degenerative disease and saw the transfer as her only chance at survival. Alex had used the TerraSave captives as test subjects, infecting them with a virus called T-Phobos that activated based on fear responses. The T-Phobos virus was designed to trigger transformation when the host experienced intense fear. Those who could overcome their fear would not transform, while those who succumbed would become monsters. Alex used this virus to test her subjects, believing that only those with strong wills would be worthy vessels for her consciousness. She had selected Claire Redfield specifically because of her history of surviving bioterrorism incidents, believing Claire's mental fortitude made her an ideal candidate. Moira Burton was infected with T-Phobos and partnered with Claire during their escape attempt. Moira had a deep fear of firearms due to a childhood incident, and this phobia was triggered repeatedly during their ordeal. She struggled to overcome her fear, knowing that giving in would mean transformation into a monster. Her relationship with Claire evolved from an initial hostility to deep friendship as they fought for survival together. Barry Burton's search for his daughter took him through the island 6 months after the initial incident. He discovered that the island had become even more dangerous, with mutated creatures roaming freely and the facility falling into the decay. Barry was partnered with a young girl named Natalia, who possessed strange abilities including the power to sense evil presences and see things others could not. Natalia claimed to have no memory of her past, but demonstrated knowledge she should not possess. The truth about Natalia was horrifying. She was the body that Alex Wesker had chosen to transfer her consciousness into. Alex had performed the transfer procedure, but something had gone wrong. Instead of completely overwriting Natalia's consciousness, Alex's mind had become dormant within the girl, waiting for the right trigger to awaken. Natalia was living with a ticking time bomb in her mind, unaware that she would eventually be consumed by Alex's personality. The island incident revealed the lengths to which bioweapons researchers would go in pursuit of their goals. Alex Wesker had been willing to murder dozens of innocent people and destroy countless lives in her quest for immortality. Her research into consciousness transfer represented a new and terrifying direction for bioweapons technology, one that could render traditional notions of death meaningless. Claire and Moira escaped the island with Barry's help, though the experience left deep scars on both women. Moira had managed to overcome her fear enough to avoid complete transformation, though she carried the virus within her. The survivors were evacuated and debriefed, but the full extent of Alex Wesker's research was never fully understood. Natalia was taken into protective custody, with experts monitoring her for signs of the dormant Wesker consciousness awakening. In 2017, a new bioterrorism crisis emerged in Louisiana, United States. The Baker family, a rural household living in a derelict plantation house, had become infected with a mysterious mold-based organism. The infection had transformed them into nearly immortal creatures capable of regenerating from catastrophic injuries. They had been kidnapping travelers and holding them prisoner in their home, subjecting them to horrific abuse, and attempting to make them part of the family through infection. Ethan Winters, a civilian systems engineer, traveled to Louisiana searching for his wife Mia, who had disappeared 3 years earlier. Mia had sent him a cryptic video message telling him to stay away, but Ethan ignored the warning and drove to the address shown in the video. He arrived at the Baker plantation to find it abandoned and decaying, filled with disturbing evidence of violence and madness. Ethan's search for his wife would drag him into a nightmare that would redefine everything he thought he knew about bioweapons. Ethan found Mia imprisoned in the basement of the guest house, but she was infected with the mold organism and attacked him violently. During the struggle, Mia severed Ethan's left hand with a chainsaw. Ethan managed to subdue her temporarily, and was shocked to discover that he could reattach his hand by simply holding it in place, the infection allowing for impossible regeneration. He had been infected upon entering the Baker property, though he did not yet understand what was happening to him. The Baker family consisted of Jack, the patriarch who possessed superhuman strength and durability, Marguerite, the mother who could control insect swarms, and Lucas, the son who retained more of his sanity but had become a sadistic torturer. There was also an elderly wheelchair-bound woman who appeared throughout the house, though her true nature was unclear. The family hunted Ethan through the plantation, treating it as a twisted game while insisting he join them for dinner. Ethan's struggle to survive the Baker house was complicated by the mold's properties. The organism had infested the entire structure, creating a hive-like network that the Bakers could sense and manipulate. They always seemed to know where Ethan was, and they could regenerate from injuries that should have been fatal. Jack Baker could be shot dozens of times, dismembered, and even blown apart, only to reform minutes later. The only way to truly stop him was to destroy enough of his body mass that regeneration became impossible. The truth behind the Baker incident involved a corporation called the Connections, a criminal organization that dealt in bioweapons development and trafficking. The Connections have been developing a special bioweapon designated E-Type, using a mold organism discovered in Europe as the foundation. The mold, related to a fungal infection that had plagued a village in Eastern Europe, possess remarkable properties including rapid regeneration, mental influence, and the ability to preserve and transfer consciousness. Mia Winters had been an agent working for the Connections, assigned to transport a young girl named Eveline, who was the E-Type bioweapon. Eveline appeared to be a 10-year-old child, but was actually a bioweapon created to infiltrate and control families or small communities. She could secrete the mold infection and use it to control infected individuals, forcing them to view her as family and obey her commands. The plan had been to sell Eveline to buyers who could use her to control military units or populations. However, Eveline had proven unstable. The ship transporting her to her buyers had been caught in a storm, and Eveline had lost control, infecting the crew and causing a disaster. The ship had crashed near the Louisiana Bayou, and Eveline had crawled from the wreckage and been found by the Baker family. They had taken her in out of kindness only to be infected and enslaved by her power. For 3 years, Eveline had used the Bakers as her family, forcing them to kidnap others in an attempt to expand her household. Mia had survived the shipwreck and been infected by Eveline falling under her control. Eveline kept Mia imprisoned as a plaything, sometimes allowing her moments of clarity where she could remember her real life and her husband. It was during one of these moments that Mia had sent the video message to Ethan, hoping to warn him away even as Eveline's control forced her to lure him in. Eveline wanted Ethan to become her father figure, completing her twisted version of a perfect family. Ethan discovered recordings and documents throughout the Baker property that revealed the truth about the Connections and Eveline. He learned that Lucas Baker had been partially freed from Eveline's control by agents from the Connections, who wanted to study her abilities. Lucas had been fitted with a serum that protected him from her mental influence, while allowing him to maintain his infection and regenerative abilities. Freed from forced obedience, but still insane from years of torture and abuse, Lucas had turned the plantation's barn into his personal torture chamber. Lucas subjected Ethan to a series of deadly traps and puzzles, forcing him to play sadistic games for his amusement. The barn was rigged with explosives, flamethrowers, and various other lethal devices. Lucas observed through cameras, taunting Ethan and providing commentary on his struggles. Unlike his parents who acted under Eveline's control, Lucas was acting of his own free will, having become a monster even without her influence. His cruelty was entirely his own. Ethan eventually confronted Eveline in the derelict Baker mansion. The little girl had been rapidly aging due to instability in her genetic structure, and she now appeared elderly and sick despite her chronological age being only a few years. Eveline's mental state had deteriorated along with her body, and she was desperate to complete her family before she died. She revealed that she could create hallucinations and manipulate perception through the mold infection, meaning much of what Ethan had experienced might not have been real. The elderly wheelchair-bound woman Ethan had seen. Throughout the house was Eveline herself, appearing to him as she truly was, rather than as the little girl she projected. She could manipulate infected individuals' perceptions to appear however she wished. The revelation explained many of the supernatural elements Ethan had encountered, from the living mold creatures to the impossible regenerations of the Bakers. Everything was connected to Eveline's control over the mold organism. An agent named Redfield arrived with the team and provided Ethan with a specialized weapon and serum designed to kill Eveline. The serum would calcify her mold structure, preventing regeneration and causing her body to crystallize and break apart. Ethan confronted Eveline, who transformed into a massive mold monster in a desperate attempt to stop him. The battle destroyed much of the remaining house structure, with Eveline throwing everything she had at Ethan in a final fury. Ethan managed to inject Eveline with the calcification and serum, and then used the specialized weapon to destroy her calcified form. With Eveline dead, her control over the mold network collapsed. The Bakers, freed from her influence and death, could finally rest. Mia survived, though she retained her infection and enhanced healing abilities. Ethan and Mia were evacuated by Redfield's team, though Ethan was disturbed to notice that Redfield's uniform bore an Umbrella Corporation logo. The Umbrella Corporation logo was explained as belonging to Blue Umbrella, a new organization formed from the ashes of the original company. Blue Umbrella claimed to be dedicated to cleaning up the original Umbrella's mistakes and fighting bioterrorism. The organization had been sanctioned by the United Nations and worked closely with the BSAA. However, many remained skeptical of any organization bearing the Umbrella name, suspecting hidden agendas and secret research programs. Chris Redfield had joined Blue Umbrella in an advisory capacity, believing that the organization's resources could be used effectively against bioterrorism if properly monitored. His decision was controversial among his colleagues, with many viewing it as a betrayal of everything they had fought for. Chris defended his choice, arguing that Blue Umbrella had access to proprietary technology and knowledge that could save lives, and that keeping them under surveillance was better than allowing them to operate independently. The Louisiana incident led to the exposure and dismantling of the Connections, though as with all such organizations, many members escaped with research samples and data. Lucas Baker had survived the plantation incident and gone into hiding, taking with him extensive research on Eveline and the mold organism. He had been in contact with other researchers and was preparing to continue his own twisted experiments. Chris Redfield led a team to track down Lucas Baker several months after the plantation incident. They traced him to an abandoned salt mine that he had converted into a laboratory and trap-filled complex. Lucas had been conducting experiments on kidnapped victims, testing various applications of the mold organism, and developing new bioweapons. He had also been in communication with a mysterious benefactor who provided resources and direction for his research. The assault on Lucas's compound revealed that he had created several mold-based BOWs, including creatures that could explode in clouds of infectious spores. Chris and his team fought through these horrors, following Lucas's taunts through recorded messages and live feeds. Lucas had prepared elaborate death traps and challenges, similar to what he had done to Ethan, but the trained soldiers were better equipped to handle his games. Chris finally cornered Lucas in the deepest part of the mine, where the madman had prepared a final surprise. Lucas had injected himself with a concentrated dose of the mold organism combined with other viral components, transforming himself into a powerful mutant creature. The battle was fierce, with Lucas demonstrating enhanced strength, speed, and regenerative abilities far beyond what the normal mold infection provided. Chris's team used specialized ammunition and explosives to finally destroy Lucas, ensuring he could not regenerate. The investigation into Lucas's activities revealed connections to a mysterious figure known only as Mother Miranda. This name appeared repeatedly in Lucas's research notes and communications, always referenced with reverence and fear. Mother Miranda seemed to be directing multiple research projects and had access to extensive knowledge about the mold organism. Blue Umbrella flagged Miranda as a high-priority target for investigation. In 2020, the BSAA faced a new crisis when several of their teams went missing, while investigating bioterrorism incidents in Eastern Europe. The disappearances followed a pattern, with teams losing contact after reporting unusual findings related to a village in Romania. The BSAA's European headquarters decided to investigate the village directly, deploying multiple teams with full equipment and support. Chris Redfield led one of these teams, approaching the village from the mountains. They discovered that the entire region had been infected with a mold organism similar to what had been encountered in Louisiana, but far older and more evolved. The infection had been present in the area for centuries, possibly dating back to medieval times. The village itself was abandoned, with evidence suggesting a sudden and violent end to its population. The investigation revealed a castle overlooking the village, a massive medieval structure that had been maintained and modernized. The castle was inhabited by a woman calling herself Alcina Dimitrescu, who ruled over the village along with 3 daughters. The Dimitrescu family had been infected with the mold organism and combined with other biological components, transforming them into vampire-like beings with incredible strength and regenerative abilities. They sustained themselves by consuming human blood and flesh. The village was also home to other infected individuals and creatures, each representing different experiments with the mold organism. There was a man-beast who controlled lycanthrope-like creatures, a deformed creature that controlled swarms, and a doll maker whose creations seemed to possess independent life. All of these lords, as they were known, served Mother Miranda, the mysterious figure who had been orchestrating bioweapons research for decades, if not longer. Mother Miranda's true nature was far more complex and ancient than anyone had suspected. She was over 100 years old, kept alive and ageless by the mold organism. Miranda had discovered the mold in a cave system beneath the village sometime in the early 20th century, long before Umbrella's founding. She'd been experimenting with its properties for decades, seeking to use it to resurrect her daughter, Ava, who had died in the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. Miranda's research into the mold had predated and influenced Oswell Spencer's work with the progenitor virus. Spencer had actually studied under Miranda briefly, learning about the mold and its properties before going on to found Umbrella. The Stairway of the Sunflower and the progenitor virus it produced were Spencer's attempt to recreate Miranda's success with the mold. In a sense, Mother Miranda was the grandmother of all bioweapons research, the original source from which Umbrella and countless other organizations had drawn inspiration. Miranda had spent a century conducting experiments on the village population, testing the mold's ability to transform and preserve consciousness. She created the four lords as experiments, each representing different aspects of her research. Miranda was searching for the perfect vessel, someone whose genetic compatibility and mental resilience would allow them to be completely overwritten with her daughter's consciousness. She had tested hundreds of subjects over the decades, keeping detailed records of each failure. Ethan Winters found himself drawn back into the bioweapons nightmare when his infant daughter Rose was kidnapped and brought to Miranda's village. Ethan and Mia had been living under protection in Europe, relocated by Blue Umbrella after the Louisiana incident. Chris Redfield's team raided their home, and during the operation, Mia appeared to be killed, and Rose was taken. Ethan, devastated and enraged, survived an attack on the transport vehicle and found himself in the village, determined to find his daughter. Ethan's journey through the village forced him to confront each of the four lords in turn. He infiltrated Castle Dimitrescu and fought the vampire lady and her daughters, eventually destroying them all. He ventured into the valley controlled by Donna Beneviento, the doll maker, and survived psychological torment in a house filled with living dolls. He faced Salvatore Moreau, a pathetic creature living in a reservoir, transformed into a fish-like monster by the mold. Finally, he confronted Karl Heisenberg, a man who could control magnetic fields and had created an army of cybernetic, mold-infected creatures. Each lord possessed a flask containing part of Rose's body. Miranda had dismembered the infant and distributed her parts among the lords, intending to use Rose as the vessel for Eva's resurrection. Rose possessed unique properties due to being born to two mold-infected parents, making her the most compatible vessel Miranda had ever found. Ethan had to defeat each lord and recover the flask to reassemble his daughter, all while his own body was deteriorating from the extreme damage he was sustaining. The truth about Ethan himself was revealed during his ordeal. He had actually died during his first encounter with Mia in Louisiana, killed when she drove a weapon through his chest. The mold infection had reanimated his corpse and reconstructed his consciousness, making him essentially a mold creature that believed itself to be human. Ethan's ability to survive impossible injuries and reattach severed limbs was because his body was entirely made of mold, held together by his consciousness and the organism's regenerative properties. This revelation explained many inconsistencies in Ethan's experience. His wounds had always healed too quickly, even for someone infected with regenerative mold. He had survived injuries that should have killed him multiple times. Ethan had been living as a walking corpse for 3 years, animated by the mold and his own will to survive and protect his family. The knowledge was devastating, but Ethan refused to let it stop him from saving Rose. Chris Redfield's apparent betrayal was revealed to be a complicated operation against Mother Miranda. The woman Chris had shot in the Winters' home was not Mia but Miranda in disguise. Miranda had replaced Mia weeks earlier, studying Ethan and Rose in preparation for the ceremony to resurrect Ava. Chris had discovered the substitution and acted quickly to eliminate Miranda, though the operation had gone wrong when Miranda revealed her regenerative abilities and escaped with Rose. Chris had kept Ethan in the dark to protect him, not realizing that Ethan would pursue them to the village. Chris led a full assault on Miranda's laboratory beneath the village, fighting through her mold creatures and attempting to stop the resurrection ceremony. However, Miranda had already begun the ritual, attempting to transfer Eva's consciousness into Rose's body. The ceremony was disrupted when Ethan arrived, having collected all the flasks and reassembled Rose. The confrontation between Ethan and Miranda became a battle for Rose's life and soul. Mother Miranda transformed into a massive mold creature, far more powerful than Eveline had been. She had over a century of experience controlling the mold and had refined her abilities to an art form. Miranda could create wings of mold tissue, fire projectiles of calcified material, and regenerate from catastrophic damage. The battle destroyed the underground laboratory and threatened to bring down the entire village. Ethan fought with desperate fury, using every weapon and resource at his disposal. His mold-based body allowed him to survive injuries that would have killed a normal human, but even his regeneration had limits. The battle pushed Ethan beyond his breaking point, his body beginning to calcify and break down from the extreme stress. He managed to weaken Miranda enough for Chris and his team to assist, and together they destroyed Mother Miranda, ending her century-long reign of terror. With Miranda dead, the ceremony's effects on Rose were reversed, and she was restored to her normal infant form. However, the village was collapsing, rigged with explosives to prevent Miranda's research from being recovered. Ethan, knowing his body was failing and that he could not survive, chose to stay behind. He handed Rose to Chris and remained in the village as it exploded, using his final moments to ensure his daughter's escape. Ethan Winters died as he had unknowingly lived for 3 years, as a mold creature animated by love and the determination to protect his family. The destruction of Miranda's village and the end of her research marked the close of a dark chapter in bioweapons history. However, it also raised troubling questions about the BSAA. Chris's team discovered that the BSAA had been deploying BOWs as soldiers in some operations, using mold-infected humans as expendable combat units. This revelation suggested that even organizations dedicated to fighting bioterrorism were being corrupted by the technology they sought to suppress. Rose Winters grew up under protection, her unique nature making her valuable to various organizations. She possessed abilities inherited from her parents' mold infections, including the power to sense and interact with the mold network. The trauma of her infancy and the loss of her father shaped her childhood, though she had no conscious memory of the events. Rose became the subject of study and training, her powers carefully monitored and developed. Years later, as a teenager, Rose underwent a procedure to connect with the mold consciousness and potentially remove her powers, which had made her life difficult. The experience took her into a realm of consciousness preserved within the mold network, a sort of afterlife where the minds of the infected could persist. There she encountered a fragment of her father's consciousness, preserved in the mold network at the moment of his death. The meeting provided closure for Rose, and allowed Ethan's spirit to rest, knowing his daughter had grown up strong and capable. That was it, guys. 2 hours worth of Resident Evil lore. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.